Ben Barlow, are you able to just introduce yourself and what you're up to at the moment?
Oh, righto, Ollie. That's always a hard job to introduce yourself, but I'm an old school, long generation farmer person, and there's plenty of us like that in ag, but had a history and career and that took me outside of farming for a while and into corporate life and learned quite a bit there, as you do, scars and all. And nowadays, having had lots to do with farming, sort of invested beyond farming into stuff pre and post farm gate. And I guess the main interest for me at the moment is this new enterprise that we brought into the stable called Edge Microbials, which is actually a very old business. It's 20-year-old and been selling biological things in agriculture for years and developing them. But of course it's becoming mainstream now and that business is starting to grow.
Just in the right place at the right time now.
Maybe luck, perhaps, or a bit of planning. Don't know.
Yeah. Well, tell me. I want to know. Back to where it started. You're a country boy. You grew up on the farm.
Yep.
Well, what do you reckon your earliest memory in and around farming is?
For me, it was all about hard work. Our family was traditional, typical farmers. We worked instead of played. I guess that's how we got ahead. We that was what life was all about. Work came before playing footy and things like that, until we went to boarding school, and then we learnt that there was more to life than work. Sometimes you could actually play a bit of sport. I grew up in that time when interest rates were really high. That was in my late teens, early uni. So I watched the struggles that my parents went through and all of the farmers of that generation, with high interest rates, and we were shooting sheep. They had no value. Wheat was $100 a tonne.
Yeah.
And it was also at a time where that generation expanded and bought land to support their families. So they were exposed in the sense that they were trying to grow their business, but they also had this unbelievable headwind of high interest rates and tough seasons and tough commodity prices. And my old man said when I finished uni, and I wanted to come home to the farm, he said, "You're bloody mad." He said, "Go and do something else." And there was a bank teller's job in Mildura on, and so I left with a really good degree at uni after 3 years to become a bank teller.
So tell me, after growing up in such a hard time, why did you still want to be involved in agriculture?
Well, it's in you, isn't it? It doesn't leave you. Agriculture is not easy, ever.
Yeah.
It's got its good and bad years, and it doesn't leave you. If you look at agriculture differently, there's lots of lenses to look at ag, Ollie.
Yeah.
You can look at it through the lens of being in it, and you can look at the lens from creating a better form of agriculture. And only in the last 10 years, probably agriculture's become, what I say, quite a sexy industry. It's not in the background anymore, it's mainstream. When you start seeing global issues of carbon, of soil fertility, lack of water, lack of arable land, growing world population, all of those mega trends, agriculture's not backseat anymore.
It's interesting. Tell me, because that's one part I reckon which is cool around this, working in it, working on it. Did you ever think that walking away from the farm in those early years that was the definitive moment that opportunity would never come back, or did you?
No, it never left me. In fact, that was in a decade after that, less than a decade actually, about 6 years after that, when I'd been working for the bank. I got into management and started earning a decent quid, I guess, as a bank manager.
Yep.
I bought my first farm north of Hamilton in Victoria. I didn't have much, but bought that.
Yeah.
And I had a lucky break by selling that to Blue Gum Company for quite a bit more than I paid for it.
Yep.
And I transferred from there to an asset at Hay. We bought a place at Hay from there. So we went from sort of 1,200 acres at Hamilton to 24,000 acres at Hay.
And was this all strategic? Were you looking at what the next industry, like the next potential boom one was?
Yes, I was. But you talked about agriculture not leaving you. I had this desire to build my own place in ag. I couldn't do it with a full-time career and have a cropping business because it needs too much focus and demand. And I was only visiting once a month, right? So, but a livestock operation with a really competent manager on where you visit once a month, my strategy was to run the business with a dog and a set of wire cutters, cheap, so that we could make a margin out of it. So it was quite different. But anyway, 2 or 3 years after that, we bought another 24 or 5,000 acres of hay. That was the time that water was separated from land, so we had another windfall. And we elected to sell our water at reasonably high prices and bought another block and sort of got to a viable size of hay for one man. And then 2 or 3 years later, we added another 30,000 acres to it. So over the course of 7 or 8 years, we'd gone from, 5 or 6 years, we'd gone from Hamilton at 1,200 acres to 82,000 acres of hay.
There you go.
And work full time at the same time.
Yeah.
So I guess that's, I suppose, if it's in you.
Yeah. And I want to know on that. So because you, like, it wasn't like you were just working down a 40-hour work week at just a local spot in town or in the city. Like you were growing a real professional career as well. So in terms of the people that you were getting on the farm, like, how did you go finding your workers? And is there certain characteristics you look for in people that are coming in to join you?
Always. It's about trying to work out how the team works. Try and find people that are different to you.
Yeah.
Understand your weaknesses. Right. So if you know your weaknesses, then you try and hire someone that can fill those gaps.
Yeah.
So I'm on the disc profile, I'm quite, I'm what they call an influencer.
Yeah.
Which means I'm big picture and I'm that sort of visionary person. That profile is also the most likely person to blow a company up, right?
Because that's where I sit.
But they're not focused on the detail, right?
Yeah.
So you said about hiring a CFO in the business, or your science head, or anything like that are really detailed people, so that you don't necessarily have to be over every line in the balance sheet and profit and loss because the person doing that every day is really detailed and knows their job.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, compensate. So, if you're going to run a place remotely from where you work, you really want to hire the person that's going to run it for you that you can work with, that also is going to fit in with the community really well.
Yeah.
Because that community you need to work with the community too. Yeah.
It's a bloody interesting area, and it's something like I always come back to. Like I know, it's probably similar to you, big picture thinker, let's get an idea, lots of energy and enthusiasm, but it's so easy to either lose interest or forget those little details. When do you reckon you started to realise yourself, like did you do professional development programs, or was there things that really opened up in terms of you understanding who you are?
Yeah, it was. I was really lucky in my mid to late 20s. I went on the Australian Leadership Program.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. So Matty Liniger, who's the current CEO, and I are in the same course 7.
Yeah.
And a lot of that group's still pretty close today. But that was a profound time that I can point to where something changed there at a pretty early age that made me understand myself and my relationships with others.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm taking off to the Kimberleys in 2 weeks.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. You'll love it. It's
going to be good.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you much about it. You can work it out when you get there, mate.
I ask everyone and they just say, we'll sit down for a beer and chat about it when you get back.
Yeah. But it's a nice segue too. So you go through that program and you utilise all you learnt through your career in lots of different settings. And there's a lovely network of people that went through it with you. And then you get to a stage in life, which is many years later for me, like it's more than 20. I probably should say nudging 30.
Yeah.
But we're now, like a company then in Albury, sponsors a position there.
There you go.
You know, so you do get an opportunity to give back, and that's part of it.
Do you reckon you had it was a bigger influence on your personal life or your professional life?
Both. Yeah, I went from thinking, you know, mid to late 20s, thinking I knew all about everything,
Yeah.
and I had all the answers. And I soon realised after about 2 years that I didn't know much at all. But it just taught me to be I think, a kinder person, Ollie, a gentler person, but still get the effects that you want to get.
And so, what stage? Like you're with NAB through this period, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you know the impact that you wanted to make? Like, was the ARLP a key part of discovering more about what's making you tick and what you wanted to do?
Oh, I don't think you ever know in life, right? It changes. There's no textbook in life. If I think now what I thought then, it's entirely different.
Yeah.
You know, every person you meet today will have a different story and a different outcome. It's really those fundamental things you pick up, you know, through programs like that or interactions with others, your learnings, and they all grow every year, and that's what happens. Pretty straightforward, really.
Yeah.
If you're open to listening to what you're hearing.
So do you reckon your passions have changed? Like have you followed your different passions with the different businesses and stages that have come with that?
Yeah, look, our passion stayed the same in the sense that I've always wanted to grow things and make them better.
Yeah.
So in land, it was buying it, developing it, on selling it to allow me to reinvest in other things. Right? The sale of hay to Paraway at the time was a means of educating children that were heading into secondary school and living in a remote area, so needed to probably have a proper education. But the other one was that it was the realisation of quite a lot of capital to be able to redeploy into the new phase of our life.
Yeah.
You know, and that took us into investments post-farm gate in a large wool and livestock business, into investments in agricultural land development and changing its land use, and into this pre-farm gate business again. And yeah, so every stage there's an opportunity.
Yeah. One thing that comes up with like many people that I kind of chat to, and I guess within our listeners as well, is around like this affinity and connection that people have to land. Like, what did it take for you guys to kind of untie that and be willing to remove yourself from the places you grew up and sell country?
Well, I think going our own way was all about the economics of allowing brothers to go their own way and maintain the family asset down in Marama where we lived and still there today, and my ability to be able to do my own thing and get back into agriculture in a way that I wanted to, which was, you know, a dog and a set of wire cutters way of running a big area in the north.
Yeah.
I think when I came to sell that country hay, I was very sad to sell it because it was a beautiful place. You know, it had Lachlan flood country and it had beautiful salt bush country, fantastic community, and still today wonderful friends with lots of people there. But I remember at the time I said to someone who I value their advice, I said, "What do you think I should do?" You know, I'm in my mid-40s. And they said to me, "Well, I thought you were mad when you went out there and you made a fist of it. And it's such an opportunity now, but with your children the age they are and needing education and the opportunities in ag, you'd be mad if you didn't capitalise on the opportunity."
Yeah.
And that's what we did. But I didn't expect that we would end up 6 years later in all these different directions.
Yeah.
But they've all come together really nicely.
I want to touch on, before we come to kind of where you're at now, but changing directions and taking opportunities. You were an agri banker with NAB, and then you stepped into the business banking side. But then the opportunity came to head overseas, and at that stage, I'm guessing you're obviously still farming in Australia.
Yeah.
Did you, the thinking behind that? Did you really think, oh God, like, what was the crux that came to in terms of taking that decision to move to South Dakota?
Well, I'll draw you back to earlier on when we first moved to Sydney from the bush, right?
Yeah.
I remember going to Sydney, and my wife's cousins lived in a very nice suburb in Sydney, one of the better ones, and I found myself living in a small flat in this suburb called Double Bay. And near where we lived, there was a bowling club. And we just unpacked the truck in Sydney, and I had a pair of khaki shorts and a pair of work boots on and a blue shirt. And I went down to the bowling club on the way to get the groceries, which was just below where I lived. I thought I'll just have a read when it opens. I might be able to go down and have a beer, and meet a few people. And while I was standing there reading this very well-dressed lady came up to me and said, "Excuse me, would you mind moving the hose on the third ring?" And I said, "Oh yeah, no worries." So I moved it for her, and then she said, "You wouldn't mind getting the mats out of the boxes and setting them up for me, would you?" I said, "Yeah, of course, no worries at all." So I did that. And then she asked me how long I'd worked there. And I said, "Well, about 2 minutes." So I learnt quickly that things are different in the city. And then I was trying to catch the New South Head Road bus. And I went down really early in the morning on the first day. I thought I'll try and get a jump on everyone here and get into work early, as you do. And I'm standing on the road and the bus goes straight past. Second bus, straight past. Still standing on the side of the road. Only the third bus goes past. I thought, bloody hell, how do you catch these frigging things? Anyway, then a fella came and stood beside me and put his hand out when the next bus came. I thought, perfect, now I know how to catch these things.
Oh.
So from there, that was a complete change. And then from there, of course, America was a similar thing where we were very well set, comfortable. We had hay running well. We had, living in Sydney, I was running all the NAB business in regional New South Wales in. So it was not agri. I'd been in agri, but I was running the business side. So I'd transitioned into business from agri, broadening my scope, I suppose, and got the tap on the shoulder to go over and be the deputy or second in command of Great Western in South Dakota, which was great, and set up agri-business over there as we knew it. So that was like pick up the family, 3 little kids, load them on a plane, go to the other side of the world. I remember leaving Tullamarine, it was February and it was about 38 degrees, and I remember landing in South Dakota, it was minus 15.
Oof.
I remember slipping ass overhead in my own Williams Beach to step out of outside the airport. So it was all that sort of stuff.
And you were thinking, God, this place is going to be good.
It was all that stuff, but it was great. Like, it was really an opportunity to grow. But what I learned from that is it's very difficult to do business on the other side of the world. And when you're dealing with different cultures to yourself, you've got to learn them. And that served us well now in NEM. As we grow NEM and we're now operating in Europe and the United States and Latin America, you've got to be cognizant of the cultural differences of the markets you're operating in.
Yeah.
So again, there's an experience through your career that you never thought that some years later would weave into your current things.
Yeah. Incredible. It's funny, I actually had a very similar experience on Oxford Street with a bus.
Did you?
And I was running late. This is only probably a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And I was running late for something I needed to get into the city, and they just drove straight past. And I thought, what on earth are you doing? Anyway, and then because I was standing, couldn't have stood closer to the curb, and the bloke just took off straight past me. But
well, I remember a time where we'd had an event in the city, and it ran late, like very late. And I'd got in a cab, and it was pouring rain, and I had to get back, and I had $10 in my pocket, and I got just the city side of King's Cross, and I tapped the shoulder of the taxi driver, said, "Pull up, mate, I'm out of money." And I got out and walked home in the rain because I didn't realise at the time that you could pay for cabs with a credit card.
Yeah.
So I was on a steep learning curve, Ollie, when I went to Sydney.
Oh, God.
Anyway, it was good.
And the cultural piece, we'll get to them in a second, though, but doing business, working in the US, what was it like?
Great. We operated predominantly in the Midwest, so it was a society very much like Australia, hard-working, rural people. We were strategic about operating in an area we understood and a sort of philosophical way of thinking like we do. That bank was bought just before the GFC, and then when the GFC hit, the value of those assets dropped quite a lot, which then in a very quick time changed the strategy to trying to acquire other smaller similar banks in the footprint.
Gotcha.
Things change, so you change.
Yeah.
So that saw us working, like running the bank and developing agribusiness, but also of an evening with a team going through the opportunity to purchase banks that might be really useful additions.
Yeah, wow.
So that ended up an acquisition of a bank in Colorado, one in Nebraska, one in Iowa. So it was quite a time.
Yeah.
And then, it was a great experience. And today, I think, I don't know how, NAB has sold Great Western since, but at the time, I think they've sold it for quite a deal more than
quite a good
we
little
started with. So it's been great. for
Unreal.
Australian shareholders.
Before we get to New Edge Microbials, I want to ask, out of all the different roles and the different businesses and things you've been involved in, has there been a favourite? I guess is the first question, and I'll come with a follow-up off that.
So yes, there are two favourites. One is obviously that beautiful big open country out west.
Yeah.
I think from a spiritual point of view, there's nothing better. You know, it comes with its difficulties, but so that's a favourite on one end of the scale, and on the other end, it's NEM in the sense that it's taken me all around the world, stimulated new activity and interest, and sort of awakened me to the possibility of being at a leading edge thing in a global context.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So either end of the spectrum is a favourite for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's jump into New Edge Microbials. Can you tell us a little bit about this business?
Yeah, well, it's I might tell you how we found it first.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting story, how you came across it.
Yeah, we went on a tour. I'm naturally curious, I suppose. So I went on a tour to Israel to look at water technology. Again, post selling at Hay, to think what we might invest in. At the time, water was an issue, and I was thinking maybe we could invest in something that's really high tech in saving water. And so that drew me to Israel. And at the time I was there, I sort of looked at plant breeding and biologicals in farming, and I came back to Australia. I thought I'd better check out whether there's anything in Australia, because I think it's a new opportunity. I sort of started Googling biological farming, and I started seeing in Europe that it was flying. I could see what was going on in the United States. I wonder if there's anything in Australia. Because usually in Australia we trail the world a bit in some of these new things.
Yep. Anyway,
there were three companies, a little one in Bundaberg, a little one in Forbes, and a large one in Albury, and I elected to talk to the owner of the larger one in Albury, who was in his 80s, who was looking to slow up. And through that we ended up acquiring the majority interest in them. And Sandy, the founder, is still a great shareholder and on the board, and we've just set about turning what is a beautiful family company into basically a company that's run along public company values and principles and staffed that way. And yeah,
I'm keen to know, and I guess maybe not many people would find themselves like in this position, but so you identify New Edge Microbials and you ask for a coffee or a beer or a meeting with Sandy. Like, what was that first meeting like? And were you going in just purely from a curious standpoint?
No, it was a matter of fate. A nice fellow made me aware of the opportunity that Sandy might want to sell.
Yeah.
So that was fate, right? So identification one, and then the fate that I had a third party who knew Sandy who made the introduction.
Yep.
And one of their key salespeople.
And I want to ask you on this, like, do you think it was, so you talk about fate and discovering it, were you putting your ideas out there and chatting to people about it, and that's how kind of this introduction?
No, it just happened through a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those conversations that ticks the box and you say, yeah, actually I'm interested in that stuff. I'd love to go and find out a bit more.
Yeah.
You know, and that led us to that. But, you know, when you think about it, farmers talk about biologicals being the new thing in agriculture, but we've been applying biological seed inoculants on pulses for the last 20 years in this company.
Yeah.
Right? We treat 2 million hectares of pulses all over Australia.
Well, and this is the part which, like, we were just chatting to you before. Like, as I was reading more and more about it, and as you're saying, the pulses, like, we used to throw the inoculant on faba beans, but I had absolutely no idea that it was a biological piece.
Yeah. So if I use the language biologicals, as a cocky, I'd probably say, I don't like that stuff.
Yeah, inoculant.
You know, if I say it's inoculant, they say, oh, of course, I get it. So now NEM is leveraging all of our knowledge and production capacity to venture out into cereals and oilseeds, which are much bigger crops globally. So our business now has gone from traditionally focused legume market in Australia to now exporting to Europe, the United States, Latin America, in soybean and peanut inoculants. You know, the chosen big crops over there that we want to focus on. And we've also investigated and I guess acquired the best science that was done in Australia over the last 30, 40 years in the scientific application around cereals and oilseeds. So we're probably one of a few companies, Ollie, in the world that can take a bacteria from a pick and grow it up in a starter and produce 10,000 litres of it and have it in a box out to the world's farmers, or in a freeze-dried vial, or in peat, or in a granule.
Yep.
There are lots of startups that and companies that are in what I call big R. You know, they develop the research, they spend a lot of time in discovery, in this case 20 or 30 years to discover the right elite strains to improve crops.
Mm-hmm.
Some claim to do it faster, but they stumble when they get to the D phase, you know, the commercialisation of taking it from a laboratory to hundreds of thousands of litres over the year and hundreds of tonnes.
Yeah.
In shipping containers. Like that's 10 to 20 years and tens of millions of dollars to get from the laboratory to the customer.
Yeah.
And I think it's not something to underestimate that you can have the most wonderful idea, but you actually have to be able to produce it at scale and deliver it to the world's farmers. And that's the hard bit.
And so breaking down, well, just I'll say for me, the Idiot's Guide to biologicals. Can you tell us, what is it and how are they made?
Yeah, righto. So think of soils, right? In the soils all around the world, there's beneficial bacteria and harmful bacteria. Beneficial fungus, harmful. Some crops thrive. So rhizobia in legumes is one of those beneficial bacteria, right? It infects and colonises legumes roots and it fixes nitrogen.
Yep.
Right. So a farmer spends $10 a hectare by inoculating, as opposed to $300 a hectare on nitrogen. Right. So it's got a real economic benefit, which is great. And it has a plant benefit, it gets better yields. So you start looking for those beneficial bacteria. So the traditional way, and the way we do it today, is we dig up soil and we look at all the bacteria and fungus that's in that soil, and we try and identify those elite things that impact crop yield or manage abiotic stress or fix carbon or fix nitrogen, or all the main issues for Australian or world farmers.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can imagine, so where do you sample the soil and how many gazillion bugs are in soil and which ones are you going to select? And that's what we've set out to do, to pick up all of that research for the last 30 or 40 years that are in CSIRO and those institutions.
Gotcha.
That work's been done,
a
lot of it, right? So now we transfer that into applied projects to see how they're performing in field and get them into a box.
Yeah, right.
Right, so instead of just doing research projects, we've got partnerships with these unis and with CSIRO and others. And our promise is that if we produce something, a royalty goes back to those partners every year on every box that's sold everywhere around the world forever. So at the moment we're contributing as a group who own them, and by that it's close-knit shareholders and staff, about $5 million a year into research in this coming out of company profits, right?
Yeah.
That's a 5-year program, so it's $25 million that we're putting into it. And of course the research partners are putting in kind, so you may as well say $50 million going into this space.
Mm-hmm.
It's about high yielding crops in climate change, so lower rainfall.
Yep.
Fixing more soil carbon, which is a big issue in terms of retaining moisture. Early crop establishment to get a crop out of the ground early and apply less fertilizer, less chemicals perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is sort of getting into horticulture biocontrol that we're taking through the registration. Yep. So it's a big job, and if you a long way to do it, but it's like saying all of that research was sitting there and all those really good people, how can we bring that to life? And they're still associated with it. Like the ones who have built this up and learned it and researched it for years are still in the projects. Yeah. So it's
you got it's not just a small team. Well, I'll say like your business, you've got quite a few people, but it's actually you've got a lot of supporters around the place.
Oh yeah. Like
ecosystem.
Yeah, like in 4 years we've gone from 12 employees to nearly 60.
Yeah.
And the business is growing at 25% year on year, which implies it doubles every 4 years.
Yeah.
But then you start thinking, so that's the business. But then you're running a really complex R&D program that has to be run tightly within a budget to get an outcome.
Mm.
And then you've got the development of international markets and all the regulatory framework you've got to get through and the trials overseas. So our international fellow, Nick McLaughlin in Singapore, manages all that. But beforehand, that was all done after hours.
Yeah.
So you can get, this is the lesson in this chat, you've got to sort of put in the hard yards first to get the business to a scale where you can start employing other people that can do all those jobs that you were doing at night, to free you up to think about how you're going to create more value in the company later.
And that's what, I'm keen to discuss on this from your background and experience, because it's something which I guess I'm finding, like if I think, say, Humans of Ag, I've been working on in 3 years in the background, like very much like have been able to think strategically, have been able to think and execute operationally, whereas now I'd say after stepping into it full time, I've gone very operational. But like, so for people, and I'm not alone, I'm just an example of a business. Like, did you wait for the timing to be right for signals, or did you go, right, let's just make a decision and go, we need someone in this seat?
We've got the luxury of seeing our future growth. We know we've got a traditional growth in the company.
Yeah.
And we know what our new growth looks like over the next 4 or 5 years, even if we don't bring anything out of R&D. This is just our core business.
And so can I ask a really dumb question? Yeah. How do you know what your future growth looks like?
Because we've got forward orders and we've got long-term contracts.
Yep.
They have minimums in them, so that underpins the business.
Clever.
So therefore you can predict with some accuracy what your production needs to be and what your human capital, the amount of people you need to do it.
Yeah.
So you've got a rough idea, but what it says to you is you've got to invest in those before it hits.
Yeah.
Right? So in the last, if you think about it, our whole leadership team is under 42. It's a mix 50-50. Our CFO's 29. Our in-house counsel's 35 and done lots of large mergers and acquisitions and handles all our contracts for us. Our head of R&D is 42 and had 20 years in soil science.
Yeah.
Our head of formulation is sort of late 30s, who's had 14 years in formulation technology. I've gone about finding young, smart people that can really work together and bring their skills around the table. We've got a lot of runway, and they, long before we actually needed them.
Yeah.
Right? So you can, maybe a year before all their time's taken up, but they've got a year to learn.
Yeah.
And a good team. And their workload might be 50% to start with, and it gets to 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 as the business grows. Perfect. But when you're in a regional setting, and Albury's a good regional setting to bring people to because it's such a good city.
Yeah.
But when you're in a regional setting, you can't really wait for when you're ready to hire the right person. You see them swim past and you say, I've got to have them now. I'll deal with what we're going to do later.
Yeah.
But when I want them, they won't be here. Right? So it's a different mindset that we've got to have in the bush, and we actually have to have a bit of reserve in the cash flow to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yep.
Right? I remember watching a video of a production system, and our sales team was saying, gee, look at that production system, that looks really good. And the person presenting that was very knowledgeable, and I said, bugger the production system, I'm hiring her. So she knew how it all worked and put it all together. So that production system wouldn't be what it is without her input putting it together, you see.
Yeah. And what's it like to be growing a global business from a regional setting?
It's all right. You can get on the Dash 8 in Albury and check your bags to Vienna or Los Angeles. It's pretty straightforward. I don't have to fight the traffic or the queues like in Sydney or Melbourne. I joke about it. Look, with modern communications now, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think COVID taught us that businesses can be run on a big screen in a boardroom the other side of the world. I must say I get very fatigued by the end of the week of solid Zooms and my days are long. Most days will start 5-ish, you know, with a call overseas to a client or something, and we're still going at maybe 8 or 9 o'clock at night with various things that are going on. Not constant, Ollie, but just always, you've got to work in time zones and various things. And,
Yeah.
so Albury's fine to run a business out of because of the freight network. So the B-double, you know, a freight goes past about every 7 minutes. We can get air freight out of Albury anywhere in the world in a day.
Wow.
You know, we can, so long as it's not massively big. Otherwise, we send it to Sydney or Melbourne by courier and put it on a big plane there. But you still only 2 or 3 days to get out of the country.
Yeah.
So it's a really good spot. And a number of our key young staff, like that are what I call the value creators, like the leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our COO has come from being a CEO of a very large company in New Zealand. Our CFO has worked for a large firm in Sydney. Our in-house counsel has come from large legal firm. Our head of productions come from a very large international owned company.
Yep.
All these people are young. I mean, we have an analyst who's in her 20s who was working with RBS, and every time you read an article or something of interest, rather than having to read and understand that at night, you know, Constance can pull all that together for you and give you a 1-page summary on the whole status of it globally in 24 hours, which helps you make good decisions.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. In little old Albury, you can actually attract this good talent.
And it sounds like you've got a pretty remarkable team sitting around you guys.
Well, it's deliberate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's deliberate. It's about actually getting them in the right spot.
That bringing in the new faces and creating. So when Sandy was running it before you stepped in, was it a global business or was it just?
No, it was just a domestic business. Yeah.
And so what stayed the same in the business, and what have you had to change?
So the culture of the business has stayed the same in terms of hard work ethic and looking after our customers.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. We looked at, it's 4 years in, and we had a team meeting of the whole team recently, and I asked the question, how many have been here less than 12 months? And 50% of the staff stood on one side of the room. And I said, how many people have been here 5 years? Right, when we took it over. That's where the other 50% went. And there were 4 long-term NEM employees in the middle of the room. Now, that's just because we put a lot of people on for growth.
Yeah.
But so the faces have changed, but the capabilities allowed us to go into these new markets and new frontiers. I think Sandy would never have contemplated going into big R&D projects on his own. I think with partners, he's really enthused by it.
Yeah.
But partners bring the ability to run the business really tightly on business lines.
Mm-hmm.
They bring capital and they help defray the risk.
Yeah.
You know, but look, being in business is risky, right? Doesn't matter who we talk to, whatever business you want to go. You look around this field day site, right? Everyone's made an investment here at some stage to build a business, and it comes with inherent risk, right? Every day.
Yeah.
Market risk, you know, capital, staff, all that stuff, production. Yeah. Like this is the most, NEM would have to be the most complex small business I've ever seen in my life. You know, because it's got science and research and production and high barriers to entry and proprietary formulations and you know, and then you've got regulations and trials and data and 800 distributors and, you know, for a smallish business.
Yeah.
Like it's really complex, Ollie.
Maybe small, medium.
Yeah, small, medium. Yeah. Really complex. Yeah.
And so what's next for you guys? You talked about the growth. You mentioned only briefly, but so just in terms of the markets that you guys are operating. So you're in Australia. Where else are you guys selling product into?
We're selling into the United States, into Europe and Latin America now. Yeah. So that's been a 3-year program.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just send exotic bacteria into foreign countries. You've got to go through the right protocols. The same this way. You can't bring foreign bacteria into Australia.
Yeah.
So it's a large investment to get into those markets because you're really investing to open the doorways before you sell a box. So you've got to take a long-term view. And I think not every business, is about long-term view. Sometimes people's approach to business is, quick valuation increase and I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Cash in, cha-ching, goodbye. Ours is, no, let's build businesses for the long term that become big established household brands that go on long after we're gone.
And off the back of that, like for the business, I guess I'm thinking like the questions around what does success look like, but also what's the impact of a successful NEM business?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a number of levels in there. So if you look at cultural and people, all those ripping young people we've got have got 15 years of runway in the best years of NEM's time.
Yep.
In terms of building the business and the risks and the fun that they can have. Unreal. Not everyone gets an opportunity like that.
Yeah.
Most people bring their lunch to work at the same time every day.
Yeah.
And leave at the same time. So they don't get that, what would you call it? Adrenaline of being on your toes, building something and going. So there's a cultural piece. There's a performance piece. I mean, if I look out in the future, I can see them almost is, well, largest sort of agriculture fermenter in Australia now, growing more. I can see us into the bigger crops. So, if you think we do 2 million hectares today and we're going to do 20 in wheat in Australia, that implies this business has to be 10 times bigger than it is today. So if you do the maths on that, and we're talking about the next 5 to 10 years, NEM has the capacity to be maybe, and I'm going to look out my crystal ball, in the top 10 agribusinesses in the ASX, maybe in the top 50. And our ambition is to actually open up the share register to the community when we know that this science is on the go, so that we can let Australians celebrate.
It's pretty cool. I think I'll sit down with lots of people, Ben, but there's probably not many that I sit across and that like I'm just like I want to work for you.
Look, it's about having that direct purpose and being fair, Ollie.
Yeah.
Like agriculture's small. You've been in it a long time, mate, and you do not grow a business in agriculture unless you're a solid citizen.
Yeah.
What you say you do. The temptation is to run out and engage a massive public relations team, marketing team, and bang the drum. And so many companies do this, and they fail to deliver. So it's all about having the poise and the courage to say no. When someone looks at what you do and says, "Oh God, this is massive, mate. You could actually make a squillion," you say, "Well, maybe, but we're not ready to do that."
Yeah.
We've actually got more things to do, which is around foundations.
Yeah.
And, we'll see what happens after that.
Oh, it sounds pretty exciting.
Oh, well, it is. I mean, it is amazing. I can see it being quite fun. It has its moments. Don't you worry. Like, you don't do something profound unless you hit a stump or two on the way through, I think. And I'd say that that's what we're striving to do, is something profound.
Yeah.
Not driven by the money at all, but just doing something profound for Australian agriculture. So we've been acquired by, like few foreign approaches to acquire them because of the high barriers to entry and the market share and things that we've got. And I've had a really clear message. I've just said that this company has the privilege of having some of the best Australian scientists and Australian science in its care. And as long as we're the majority shareholders, it'll never be foreign owned.
Yeah.
And that's our position.
I've got a couple of questions which I want to wrap on. One being, so I've in the last few months talked with a startup Australian business as well. They're making compostable cling wrap out of potato waste.
I've
out of
seen it.
Melbourne.
It looks great.
Wrap.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Their question was, and I think interestingly, because you guys you've done it, you've hit the export market, but when you're bringing an Australian product into new international markets, what is the messaging, and how are you guys approaching that? Like, what's the thinking behind, and how should, more broadly, Australian businesses, when they're looking and moving into export markets, be talking about brand Australia or whatever it might be?
Yeah, right. So interestingly enough, we don't leverage brand Australia at all. We demonstrate the efficacy of our products by going into trial head to head with American products or European products, and we go into field trials and we prove that they work. And that's independently done. It's not our data; it's independent parties we put together to do it. And I think the other thing is that we've got a big product suite, and all sorts of formulations. But we've identified that, compact little freeze-dried vials of inoculant, so 30 grams equivalent to 3 litres of traditional inoculant, or 2.5 kilos of peat inoculant. That 30-gram vial can whip around the world cheaply. Right? What are the world's big crops? There's soybean and peanut. So let's just focus on one product, a vial, and 2 crops. Whereas here in Australia, we've got every legume species you want, and all formulations. So my advice is, think about what you can take into a market where you've got an advantage, and then leverage it. That wrap has got an advantage everywhere. It's very good.
Very clever. And a question which I ask absolutely everyone that comes on the podcast, Ben, is if you get the chance to go, and talk to Year 10 students about a career in agriculture today, what's your message to them about why they should consider working in agriculture?
It's the best career in the world. It can take you anywhere. We just had a chat where it can take you, and I've listened to so many podcasts with people who are in agriculture. They've gone in all directions, right? It can take you so many places. And really, I'd say to them, what do you love first? Right? And they say, I like mechanics. Good, you can be in agriculture. What do you love? I love art. Good, you can be in agriculture. You can be creative about creating brand work for agricultural companies. I love animals. Good, you can be in agriculture. You can be a vet. You can look after animals. I'm into the environment. Okay, well, you can be in agriculture because agriculture. So let's start with the question, what do you love? And let them tell us, and then let's do a thing. So I did a thing recently. It's a good question, because I did a thing with Year 10s where I had a chat to them. And the overriding theme out of the Year 10 cohort, when they were talking about career choices, was being involved in climate, in the environment, or in community service as a career. Very few people spoke about agriculture. But if you think about agriculture, it's environment, it's climate, it's community service, and it's growing stuff. So they're interested. I just don't think they know about ag as a career.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. I think it is looking at that question, which it might even just be a future question. But have you got a question that you'd like me to ask a future guest at some stage on the podcast?
Yes. How do you find time to really think about the strategic things that take you forward?
It's a very good question.
It's one of the hardest things to do, and that's why I think it's a relative question for all your guests that you've had, and one's coming. Because that investment, at the time you think, how am I going to find it? I haven't got time to do that. But that investment could be the difference between pedaling the bike hard, or taking a new direction, or slightly different. So ask them that question, Ollie. How do you find time to really think about strategy?
Lovely. Well, Ben, thank you so much for sitting down and having a yarn. It's been fascinating.
Mate.
Thank you.
Pleasure, mate. If it was later, we'd have a beer.
You've got one next to your leg.
Well done.
Thank you.